Welcome to the Krueg Show. Larry Krueger, Ryan Smith, and ex-Dolphins and Saints general manager Randy Mueller, whose brother Rick and I worked together in the Canadian League back in the mid-'90s with the old Sacramento Gold Miners, and Randy's with us to talk a little Niner football, talk a little bit about the season ahead. Randy, thanks for some time.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you guys. You're bringing back the Gold Miners. That's awesome. I went to a few of those games. It puts a smile on my face.
Well, we wanted to have you on, Randy. First of all, Rick, how is Rick doing? I know both you guys are still very much involved in football, and it's like a kind of a personnel, it's a personnel family, huh? You guys are both involved in the player personnel side of things.
Yeah, we are. We were lucky to, I want to say, have jobs where it didn't seem like work. I spent 35 years in the league myself, and he's probably got 20 some, but we're both actually kind of excited. Now we're both involved in the retake up of the XFL. And I'm in the Seattle team. He's with Bob Stoops in Dallas. So, kind of a winding down type role for both of us. But it's been fun. We're kind of building our teams ready to play next January. So looking forward to it.
Well, good luck to you guys. And both you guys are outstanding, proven personnel guys for sure. I was really distinctly, blessed that year in Sacramento because I had not only did I have Rick Mueller and the late Bill Urbanek and Kay Stevenson and a lot of great coaches, but then Joe Woolley was there, and Joe was a wealth of personnel information. And I would sit around the room and listen to Rick and Joe and some of these guys go back and forth on players for hours, and it was really it was an education. So why don't we start there? Your professional evaluation of Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State. He had that last year. We only played the one game against Central Arkansas. So he was very limited. I saw a stat on draft day that no quarterback had in the last 40 years of the NFL draft had ever gone in round one and threw fewer passes than what Trey threw at North Dakota State. So to me, when the 49ers took him, Randy, it was definitely like the big swing, right? They were taking a big swing on a projectable quarterback prospect that still needed a lot of coaching up, that still needed a lot of tutelage and a lot of refining, if you will. But what did you see with Trey coming out of North Dakota State? Because now there's a lot of discussion about his throwing motion and his hitch and his this and his that, and he's been scrutinized to death. But you're a professional evaluator. What did you see?
Well, you're right about one thing. I'm a professional evaluator that has been at it a long time, but I will say this about Trey Lance, and my opinion, thoughts, philosophy on him has not changed. I understand that the 49ers took a risk in trading up to get him. And I've said from day one, that's a risk that I really couldn't have taken based on everything you just said, Larry, the minimal throws, the minimal competition, all of the above. And we can see the upside. We can see the sky is the limit with him. But I just couldn't see enough on tape in the body of work that I saw that warranted moving up to make a deal like that. So I kind of took Trey Lance out, and I look at all the quarterbacks. I look at all the players really each year. So I got to see a lot of film on him. I kind of took him out of my equation because I just couldn't do that. And I'm not saying the 49ers are wrong. I'm not saying Kyle's wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying my experience as, like you said, a team builder and evaluator, I just couldn't make that deal. I couldn't risk. I didn't have enough information to make that deal. So that was, a deal that I think obviously it's come under scrutiny since then. Having said that, I think he's a work in progress. That's the best I could say about him. Now, I haven't been there every day. I haven't seen the practices. I do know this going into last year. I remember Kyle saying we're going to use him in certain packages. We're going to use him to do certain things to supplement Jimmy G with him. I don't think any of that happened. And so there's some kind of a disconnect there that didn't happen. So I'm still waiting to see it with Trey Lance. I understand that Kyle's gone out of his way to really tell us how good Trey has been in the offseason, but I'm not ready to drink the Kool-Aid yet. I want to see it myself. And so I just haven't seen enough of that to where, gosh, I surely couldn't stake a playoff team's future on him right now.
Before Rye jumps in, give me your do you have a thought on his throwing motion as you've seen it? I mean, there is a little bit of a little, I don't want to say it's a hitch, but it's a little bit of a wind up. It's not it's not that he's giving, it's not that it's a slow release. It's just that his take back has a little circle to it. Do you see anything fundamentally wrong with the way he throws the football?
I think what you see is what you get at this stage. Now, we can talk about adjusting that throwing motion. You can talk about some of the little things you can tweak it. But as you guys know, when you get under the gun, when the real bullets start flying, guess what happens? You revert back to how you know how to do it and how you've done it your whole life. So I don't know technically that there's anything that's fixable or changeable. Maybe minutely there is. I agree with you. I think the throwing motion, but I saw that early on. I think they would have seen that in college as well, that the throwing motion is a little different. There just wasn't enough of all the throws that you would look at to check all the boxes to warrant, really the giving away future picks and all the other, capital that they gave up to get up there to get him. So, I'm far from a quarterback technical guy. I played the position. I understand how it works. I do know that the ball has to come out quickly. I guess we'll see. We haven't seen this kid under duress enough to be able to make a judgment, in my opinion. So I know there's been a couple analysis guys who have said he's a year away from being a year away. That kind of was my opinion of him last year. So I haven't seen anything different because we haven't played any games.
Well,
go ahead, Ryan, jump in.
Well, Randy, you took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I said as well. He was a year away from being a year away. And I think people got a little bit, I don't know, the expectations for him and essentially coincided with, ripping on Jimmy G and kind of building Trey up into this thing where in reality, no one's seen him play enough to have a super strong take on him either way. Right. And I was wondering, in your opinion, are you expecting week one that we're going to see a little bit less of the traditional Shanahan offense and, a little more just focusing on defense, run game, and actually getting the quarterback involved in the run game, like maybe, carrying the ball 6-10 times?
Well, I think he has to. I think you've got to play to his strengths. But here's the hard part. When you start doing that, you kind of limit what you do offensively. And when the scheme goes away to a point to highlight a specific player and a skill set, it's easier to defend, in my opinion. So I don't know what we're going to see, to be honest with you. What I would forecast is ups and downs. That's going to be the case, I think, throughout the first half of the season for sure. I think you're going to have a lot. You're going to have to take the bad with the good. It's just the way it is. The kid hasn't seen the speed of the game as to how it's going to unfold. I think the fascinating thing about at least opening weekend for me is that we get to see him against Justin Fields, right? And it's two guys that everybody had opinions on a year ago. They were developed in different ways. They've been under the microscope in both of their cities. I think it's fun that we can actually sit and decide ourselves. We don't have to go on coach speak or what anybody's saying. We get to watch and see where they are in their development.
The thing about Trey that I really liked and still like is that I really believe that, first of all, football's the family business. Carlton played in the CFL with Saskatchewan. I remember scouting him. He was a defensive back. So, I really believe the kid loves the process of football, right? The watching the film, watching the cut up film, putting in the mental reps, the physical reps with your receivers, the field work, the mechanics. I really think he's going to get there because I think he's wired right here. I think he's tremendously athletic, and I think there's enough upside potential. But it's definitely not. Some quarterbacks, they say, are born, others are made. Let's say Steve Young was made, or maybe a Joe Montana was born. When I say that, I know that's generalizing, but just there's a lot of natural things that Joe did that Steve didn't do until he was in the league 8-9 years. I really believe Trey's going to get there, Randy. I just don't know that it's going to be this year. And it's not always a straight line to success. He reminds me in a lot of ways of Alex Smith, who was a great quarterback prospect on paper coming out of Utah, but he was, coming out of a gimmicky offense and had to transition to the NFL, tighter windows, everything's faster athletes, and he looked like a fish out of water that first year. Now, we know Alex made 3 Pro Bowls. except none of them. He was drafted number 1 pick in 05. His first Pro Bowl was 2013. It took 8 years. So I really see, I hate to put that on Trey that it's going to take that long, but I think if you ask me about Trey, what's my evaluation? I'd say he's eventually going to get there in my mind. I really believe that. I just don't know that it's going to be this year, next year, if it's going to be right away. And we're in a very impatient deal. You don't get forever. Can you see that as far as how much do you scout the player and what you're seeing on the film as opposed to the makeup of the kid, the drive, the work ethic, how all in he is on the process of pro football?
I think you bring up some really good points, and I think the process and the work ethic and the time spent is all important, especially at this position. But here's my problem. I just haven't seen enough of this kid to even project him into the role that they are projecting him in. So it's just, I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying I haven't seen him do it at North Dakota State. I didn't see it in his first year with the 49ers. So I just don't know. I think it's risky at best. And I've said from day one, I just don't know how they could turn over the keys to the whole car to this kid, knowing what we all know now. Yeah, we've got to jump in and give him the ball. But like you said, it may take 2 or 3 years. We all know Aaron Rodgers sat 3 years. All these guys sit different times. Some play right away and it ruins them. Some, again, it depends. The best thing he has going for him is he's got a good team around him. So that's a plus. And a lot of these guys don't. I mean, even with Justin Fields in Chicago, who obviously the 49ers open against, his surrounding cast isn't anywhere near what the 49ers have. So all of these are elements of really just with Trey Lance, the unknown. And I'll say once again, I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying I'm not smart enough to say he can from the stuff I've seen. And that includes all his college stuff and the first year. I can't tell you. I just haven't seen enough. Maybe Kyle has seen something that none of us have. God bless him. I mean, he's smart. He gets it. I just haven't seen it yet. That's all.
Well, and I think that's extremely telling and that's something people need to hear because there's so many, people on Twitter who are quote unquote like scouts at this point, 49ers scouts. And, they all have these super strong opinions. Got a guy down here who won a GM of the year, and he's saying, I'm not smart enough to evaluate it based off the sample size. I think that's exactly right. I really believe they have the best roster outside of quarterback in the league, and these guys want to win a Super Bowl. Everything we've heard has been very kumbaya coming out of there. Him and Jimmy are super close. The locker room, it's a very team first. It goes like, I think Sherman said team, then teammate, then, self. So that all sounds great. But do you think around week 8, that, let's say Trey's struggling a little bit. Do you think that the players are going to let, Kyle know, if they think, Jimmy is the guy? And do you think that could cause some issues down the, stretch run of the season if they feel like they don't have the best guy back there to actually keep going and win ball games?
Well, all I know is what I've used as my gauge throughout all my time as being a decision maker in the NFL is the locker room kind of pretty much ruled. And I would make sure I had the pulse of those leaders, whether it's Trent Williams or Bosa or Deebo Samuels. Those guys are your leaders, right? And I would definitely have their pulse on how they feel. I've said all along that having Jimmy G back is a good thing. I think it's insurance against the ups and downs. This is a playoff team. We need to be able to win games, not at the expense of developing Trey Lance. I think that's the delineation, right? This can't be a referendum on Trey Lance. If it is, Kyle's going to lose some credibility in the locker room because I don't think that you can do that. I think they want to win games. They ought to win games. They should win games, and they all know it. One thing about players is they know, and they know the reasons that they're being held back or the reasons they're going forward. So I do think they will have a voice in this whenever it is. But here's the thing. I don't think it's a long-range problem. I don't think Trey Lance is going to be affected long-term by having Jimmy G there. Here's the thing that I would be concerned about because I've heard the criticisms now that, now Trey has to look over his shoulder. This is pro football. This is big boy football. We're all looking over our shoulders every day at our job, right? Trust me. If his skin is that thin, we got the wrong guy. I don't care. So I'm not worried about that. And here's the other thing. Jimmy G signed a 1-year deal. This is a 1-year deal. It's not a referendum on his development. I saw Mike Holmgren in Seattle bench Trent Dilfer. I saw him bench Matt Hasselbeck. Guess what? They came back and took him to a Super Bowl. So, hey, suck it up, Buttercup. We got to do what we got to do to win. And winning is what the locker room, what it matters. And they know the decisions that the coach makes or that the GM makes affect winning. That's when they're going to judge the decision makers. So it may be a little convoluted, but it's not a participation trophy, and it can't always be about just developing a particular player. It's more about what's right for the team and the 49ers.
Give us your evaluation on Jimmy, because, the league kind of spoke on him this year. The fact that he would. Now, I don't know if they were speaking out against Jimmy, the quarterback, and the flaws that he's demonstrated, or if it was really a pushback on, I don't want to trade for that player at that price tag. We're in a salary cap era, and he had a $25 million plus price tag. But now the 49ers have essentially, with the work of Don Yee and the okay of Jimmy G, have reworked that deal. It's now a much more tradable deal. I looked at the deal to bring back Jimmy G as just an overwhelming positive. You took an asset that you could not move. You gave yourself a month-long or 6-week-long insurance on a quarterback that's extremely talented but very raw and unknown. And so you have Jimmy there as an insurance policy, but you've also upped his value because now he's a very palatable $6.2 million deal for any acquiring team. But what is your evaluation of Jimmy? Because to me, Randy, I see a player that has a lot of leadership traits and is tough and is resilient emotionally, physically, as far as he'll bounce back if he makes a bad play. I think he's a good leader. But I'm also seeing the same flaws that made the 49ers yearn for somebody better. He doesn't throw the deep ball. He's not great late in the down. He doesn't really make you defend outside the numbers. There's some huge patches of real estate that you really don't have to defend against Jimmy Garoppolo. So late in the down, defenders cheat to the middle. He floats passes late in the middle of the field. They wind up intercepted. That's what I'm seeing. You're far more advanced in your evaluation skills than I am. Give me your thoughts on what you thought of Jimmy coming out of the FCS level, coming into the draft as a second-round pick, and what do you think of him right now?
Well, I think the process has done well. I mean, he's obviously improved since he came out of, Southern Illinois or wherever it was, the small school, right? I think this, and I think this probably is what led Kyle and John to the decision of drafting a Trey Lance. I go back a couple years with this, Larry. You remember a Monday night game they played at home against Seattle, and Seattle really came after Jimmy G. And I mean, they got after him. They blitzed the sink, and it was ugly. And I think the 49ers ended up still winning the game. But I felt like from that point on, under pressure, Kyle knew he had to call a different game with Jimmy G. He made some critical mistakes. He had to mix in a bunch of screens or draws. He had to take the pressure off Jimmy G, because I think that in Jimmy G's, outside of his wheelhouse is dealing with pressure, especially up the gut. And he will make some critical errors when he's pressured. Now, a lot of NFL guys will. But I think from that day on, Kyle thought he had to call a different style of game with Jimmy G there. He wanted a more athletic guy. He wanted a guy that could break out of the pocket. He wanted a guy that could fix things when it didn't go like he drew it up on the board. And that's not Jimmy. Jimmy's got to have it drawn up, kind of how Kyle sees it. And he's not able to ad-lib quite as much as a guy like Trey Lance. And I think that's what led him to a little more athletic guy, a guy that can break out of the pocket and do some things on his own. So I think his evaluation has evolved to the point where that kind of led them to choose a different quarterback. Having said that, I agree with you on the restructuring of the deal, what him and Don Yee did. But you remember, they gave him permission really to talk as far back as March to other teams. So that's the little bit of the lead in this story, is that Jimmy and Don had 5 months to figure out the best landing spot. They couldn't. They could have. Everybody said Seattle's waiting for him to cut him. Seattle's waiting for him to cut him. Well, he could have came to Seattle. He could have forced them to get cut, and come to Seattle. He didn't do that. I think Jimmy G sees his path to 1, winning, and 2, playing again as pretty good by staying in San Francisco. So that's a little bit telling as well with the Trey Lance story. Is Jimmy seen all this evolution of Trey Lance? I don't think he would have stayed had he not thought that he was going to get the ball at some point. So I think he's going to be reinserted. It's just a matter of when. That's just my opinion from 30,000 feet, for whatever it's worth.
Well, following up on Jimmy, I'd love to get your thoughts on everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people are saying, the league sort of told everyone what they think of Jimmy because he didn't get traded. Personally, I feel like it just had to do with the injury. And then, because of the injury, the quarterback musical chairs that goes on, by the time he was ready, all the seats had been taken. Everybody had moved on because you got to move on. You got to come up with a plan. You can't wait till, that late in the season to find your quarterback. So I think that there are places out there for him. And with that said, now a lot of people are saying instant reaction. This makes this contract, tradable. He's going to get moved at the deadline to some team like the Commanders or whatever that loses Wentz, or let's just say. Do you feel like there's a strong chance he's going to be traded because there was a no trade clause included in the contract? There's playing incentives that can go up to $16 million that were included in the contract. And if they just wait out the year, they get a third round compensatory. So do you think that there really is going to be a market that is going to be that drastically better than the compensatory that, they would actually be able to trade him?
That's a great question. I don't think he will be traded. I just think he controls that now, right? By having no trade clause. Doesn't mean that they can't trade him, but he gets to say yay or nay. So I don't think he will get traded. I agree with you. The market, I don't see it as the prior market. I don't see as a referendum on Jimmy. Like you said, he had the shoulder. He had the $24 million, on the salary. So there were a bunch of reasons. And there wasn't a great thirst for guys like him around the league. But I think that was more in general than it was a specific, referendum on Jimmy can't do it. So I do think he'll end up playing again somewhere next year. How it all works out, I think, is dependent on one thing: how Trey Lance plays the first month of the season. I think that dictates everything for me. There's no way I could trade Jimmy G if Trey Lance is up and down. If he's off the charts, great. Maybe you see a little window where Jimmy G can leave town. But, I think it's all dependent on how Trey does, how the 49ers do. That determines whether, they can get anything for Jimmy G at all at some point.
I remember Randy. We're talking to Randy Mueller, a longtime NFL executive with the Dolphins and Saints, and has worked around the league and now working in the XFL, or the remade XFL, the second edition of the XFL. Rick Mueller, your brother, I remember sitting around and we were having a conversation about quarterbacks. And he made a statement. He said, you know what? There's always a race that starts at the beginning of a quarterback's NFL life. And it's, can he learn what to do and get up to speed on the speed of the game and how quickly the windows open and close? Can he get used to NFL complexity and NFL speed before they get their body beaten up to the point where they're now diminished? And the name that came up, or the name that, came up when I was thinking about this in more recent vintage after that point, was Rick Meyer, who at that point, when we were having the conversation, I think was NFL Rookie of the Year that first year. And then in 3 years in a row, Rick was the most sacked quarterback in the league. And he lost a little bit of his timing, I think a little bit of his belief, a little bit of his conviction. He lost something. And then physically, he might have been a little bit diminished. And a quarterback prospect that a lot of personnel people loved became not the same player 4 years in that he was that first year in. That all being said, the 49ers have Spencer Burford, a rookie at right guard, I should say. They've got Aaron Banks, essentially a rookie, only had like very few snaps. And they're going with Jake Brendel, who's a street free agent at center to start. They're very inexperienced inside. How concerned are you that the 49ers have an equation that's built with a very unproven quarterback, and then the interior of the offensive line, there's not that stalwart, there's not that rock that you can absolutely depend on. And you may see pressure up the gut, and that's, you want to hurt a quarterback's confidence, have a lot of pressure in his face. How do you see that setup playing itself out?
Well, I think you're right. I think so many of these quarterback situations are organizational failures or successes. I mean, you go back to the Rick Meyer days. I lived at Larry. I didn't have to hear it from anybody. I'm the guy that traded Rick Meyer to Chicago. So
So you saw that, huh? Was that a correct assessment of what went on there?
Yeah, you left out of my bio my 20 years with the Seahawks. So that's well, I lived it week to week. I lived it, and Dennis Erickson was our coach at the time, and neither one of us was in charge when we drafted Rick, but he was our quarterback. So in Rick's case, I think it was the more we gave him offensively, the less we got out of him. And so my point is, it is about the system. It is about the scheme. It is about the people around you. And like I said, so many of these quarterback situations are organizational in a sense. So I agree with you. I think this one comes back to me on Kyle. I think he's the one that took the stand on him. He's the guy that has to run the offense. He's the one that has to call the plays. I think he's the one that knows if there is some inferior help up front, if the offensive line is weak here or there, he's got to adjust to that. So he's got his finger in a lot of holes in the dike, and I don't know how long he can keep all those holes filled. And again, that leads me back to, I'm glad they got Jimmy G, because at some point there may be bigger leaks to fill besides training Trey Lance. So they have that option now. Before, they were just going to have to live with it. So I agree with you. I think these are hard to sort out, especially when you connect the timing, because everybody develops different. And it is a process. It is it just takes time for people to learn how to process all the information. What these quarterbacks get asked to do now is crazy. If people only knew the amount of input they take in and spit out in a matter of seconds on every play, and that's the big difference between college and pros. The pros have a lot more information. We just can't call another play. We don't get 85 plays in a game. Sometimes we get 60, and we might get 10 series. So the whole dynamic changes in processing information from the quarterback's point of view. I don't know about Trey. I haven't seen enough of it. And it's not because we haven't tried. I've seen everything he's done so far. I just don't know.
Well, moving off from the quarterbacks a little bit, I saw that, you were an executive for the Chargers back in 2017 when the Chargers brought in Anthony Lynn. Anthony Lynn is now the running backs coach of the 49ers. And, there's no more Mike McDaniel. I'm not necessarily sure who the offensive coordinator is this year. I mean, Kyle's obviously going to call the plays. But I was wondering, if you could shed a little insight on Anthony Lynn and, how you think he may influence this ground game, because it seems like all reports are that they're going to move a little bit more to a power running game. And I'm not sure if that has anything to do with Anthony Lynn or not. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, that's his style, that's for sure. Anthony came up in the business as a running back coach. I've spent time with him together with the Chargers. I think he's a no-nonsense guy. I think he will be really good for that running back room. I don't know how much influence he'll have over the whole system. My guess is probably not a lot, because knowing Kyle and where he comes from, they're going to still do what they want to do. But I think Anthony will push the running game every chance he can, and that's a good thing. I think he'll make them a little tougher, a little more gritty, if they can be and if they need to be, because that's just his style. He's a running back taskmaster, going to keep his thumb on everybody in that room. And I think it's a good move for the 49ers to have a guy like that. And it's maybe somebody that Kyle can bounce things off of, even from a leadership standpoint. I mean, this guy led an NFL franchise with the Chargers. So good guy, good coach, solid addition for the 49ers without a doubt. I think you got to dismiss the last year in Detroit that brought him here. I think, as we know, a lot of things happening in Detroit, so I can't blame that one on Anthony, that's for sure.
This game between the Niners and the Bears is obviously, highlights two second-year quarterbacks in Trey Lance and Justin Fields. There were 6 quarterbacks taken relatively early in the last draft. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, Davis Mills went a little later, and then Justin Fields. Looking at that group, who did you like the most coming into the league? And now that you're a year plus in and you've had a chance to kind of see them adapt to the league, everybody's got a different equation. I think Fields probably is the least supported. Trey's been the guy who's played the least. But who do you like the most out of that group right now?
Well, I still think Trevor Lawrence has the highest ceiling, right? The Jacksonville kid coming out of Clemson. He was my choice as having exactly everything you want on paper. Just a matter of him learning the NFL game, kind of forgetting most of the stuff that he learned at Clemson to adapt to the NFL side. So I like him in the long run. I liked Zach Wilson a lot coming out. I know he made a ton of mistakes last year with the Jets. I don't think they're all his fault. And the best thing for him would be becoming a sophomore or a junior. That's just part of the process. I think you can say the same about Justin Fields. He was probably the next guy in line for me, in that I think they just needed to play. I see the upside. I see all the skill set. They needed to adapt to the NFL speed of the game. Those were the three top guys for me. Again, I set Trey Lance aside just because there wasn't enough to go on. I couldn't. There was a giant leap of faith needed, and I wasn't willing to do that, having been a decision maker in the big chair. Mac Jones, I thought, had some physical limitations. I know there were a lot of coaches that fell in love with him. I think mainly because of the processing, because he's so smart, because he's a leader. They knew exactly what they would get with Mac Jones. I think you're going to see some limits on him physically. I don't know if he can make all the throws per se at times, but he times things. He anticipates things as good as anybody. And therefore, we saw that last year. He was ready to play maybe sooner than the rest of them. Whether he can carry a whole franchise for a long period of time with his physical skill set, I don't know. I think the hard part, and again, this comes back to Trey, like you said, he's played the least. And I think the best thing about rookie quarterbacks is they got to go through it. They've got to face live bullets. They've got to, what's the saying, go fail forward fast. And that's what we saw with Justin Fields last year. We saw a failure, a colossal failure. But I think he's going to be better for it. I think Zach Wilson's going to be better for having gone through that. We saw other quarterbacks throughout the years. Peyton Manning was awful his rookie year. Guess what? He got through it, though. It's like a necessary evil. And I guess that's the hard part with Trey Lance is he just hasn't done it. We haven't seen him fail miserably yet. Maybe he won't, but history is the best indicator of the future, and there hasn't been many that haven't failed initially. So I guess we got to be ready for that rocky road that he's going to have. But that was kind of my assessment of those quarterbacks a year ago.
One guy I got to get your thoughts on because I'm just so enamored with what I've seen from him, and I'm now becoming synonymous with this player because I'm so bullish on him, and that's Brock Purdy, who I did not think a lot of when I saw him in college. But when you go back and watch the film, I mean, he's the guy. First of all, he played a lot of football, so he's a veteran type quarterback. He's a 4-year starter. He's got 32 Iowa State records. He had a very good record at Iowa State. He's got kind of a little bit more mobility, a little bit more athleticism than you think. He's got a little bit more toughness. You look at the 6 feet and change, 6'1", maybe a tad under 6'1", but he's about 220 pounds, and he's got that kind of linebacker-like mentality, and he'll take off, he'll dive head first. Just watching him, I saw him in the minicamp, Randy, and I thought, this looks like a kid who's totally comfortable. And then I'm thinking about it, and I'm watching Sudfeld and Lance next to him. He has more experience than they had combined. And then I saw it in training camp. The guy's playing with a great tempo. He's under control. Every drill he's mastered. He's throwing the ball on time. It's coming out not early, not late, on time. He's throwing it out well on the run. Then we go to the preseason. He's operating the 2-minute drill. The first game, he's killing the clock. He's winding that play clock all the way down to like 1 second before he's snapping the ball. Very veteran-like move from a guy in his first NFL start. Then they show the up close camera from the end zone, and he's got the same kind of calmness as you see in like Aaron Rodgers at this point. As he's getting guys lined up right. He's throwing strikes. Everybody looks at Nick Mullins, who was just here, and makes the comparison because physically they look very similar, and I get that. I see a totally advanced player. I see a guy who I know is Mr. Irrelevant, but to me, I see a guy that he doesn't have quite the big NFL arm, but it's not a rag arm. I mean, he can make the throws, and to me, if you didn't know anybody's draft position and you didn't know anybody's bio, and you just let your eyes tell you what you saw, Brock Purdy was the 4th 49ers' best quarterback in the preseason. I think the numbers revealed it. What was your evaluation of Purdy, and what have you thought so far? He's had a tremendous preseason to the point where they gave Nate Sudfeld $2 million guaranteed, and still they cut him loose, and he wound up in Detroit for Campbell there because Purdy beat him out, and it was clear to everybody, including John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. What did you think of Purdy at Iowa State? What do you think of him?
Well, I think the thing that held Purdy back, per se, by most draft analysts is the big arm. I think the arm strength is where everybody goes initially. Even NFL scouts go to that. But the hardest thing for people to measure, in my opinion, especially about a quarterback, is anticipation, instincts, timing, all the things that you mentioned, calmness in chaos, which is the pocket. And he seems to excel at those levels. He's okay when it's not blocked up correctly. He's okay when there's people flying around. I think that is evident of him. You just have to overcome sometimes maybe the lack of top physical skills, and some of that is arm strength of making all the throws. But you can make up for it if you can anticipate and you have instincts and you kind of see things before they happen. So if you watch a lot of Brock Purdy stuff, you'll see he wasn't shocked by a lot of things. He always had a plan. Sometimes when you play the position, it's as simple as when you break the huddle, you want to know your fail safe. I want to know where my check down is. And so I want to know before I even snap the ball where I'm going when everything goes to crap. And he has a great knack for that. That's the way he's always been. Some of the great quarterbacks are like that. He reminds me of a kid that we had in Seattle. I don't know if you remember John Kitna. Was a free agent pickup for us, had thrown for 10,000 yards at Central Washington. Nobody really knew about him. But I always felt like when I watched him in college and then when we got him in Seattle, when there was time left on the clock, I thought we had a chance. And there's no box for that when you evaluate quarterbacks. You don't get to talk about that much, but I think it really matters. And it sounds to me like Brock Purdy's got a little bit of that in him. He's going to give you a feeling of, we got a chance. Just give him 30 seconds here. We might just win the dang game. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. And I credit the decision makers with the 49ers that they saw it and were willing to bite off a $2 million guarantee on another player to keep him. So I think that shows a lot that they see the same things we do. And I think sometimes it's not an exact science, and it's hard to get all of that intangible information when you're evaluating these kids coming out, and you really sometimes don't see it until they're in front of you, and then it's day after day the kids grow on you. I think that's what's happened with Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
There were reports that Trey was annoyed by the 49ers decision to bring back Jimmy Garoppolo. People asked me about that on the radio this week, and I said, it's not ideal, but it's not, to me, I don't look at it as an overwhelming negative. He should be annoyed. If he's not annoyed, maybe we got the wrong guy. You know what I mean? If he wants to play, then, he probably should be annoyed that Jimmy's there. But do you think that this is a major, hurdle for Shanahan and Lynch to conquer this year, to try to bring this team from A to B with the unknowns at quarterback? Do you think it could blow up the entire season, or do you look at this as just, it's competition and get used to it, and not that we don't care how Trey feels, but we have to separate that from roster building and trying to achieve our football goals? Yeah,
I agree with you. I think we talked about it earlier, but I don't think this season can be a referendum just based on what Trey Lance does. If he is annoyed by it, tough luck. I mean, hey, like I said, we all are looking out for our jobs every day. This is big boy football, and if it bothers him, hey, maybe it spurs him on. Maybe it ticks him off. I know if it was me, I want the best guys on our team we can get, and if it's at my expense, so be it. I want to win games. That's what I want to do. And so I think the locker room feels that way. They're going to want to play whoever's giving us the best chance to win. And the same can be said for your head coach and your GM. The locker room wants you to make a difference for what we can do on Sundays. And if it means we have to set Trey Lance for a week or two, so be it. Again, it's a one-year deal. Jimmy's not going to be there beyond this year. He's not. So we're not going to destroy a quarterback in 1 year, no matter what happens. So I've heard those same reports too, that he's annoyed or this or that. Hey, it's 1 year. And you've not shown yet that you're ready to go. So we're just minimizing our downside by having Jimmy G around as an option. That's the way I see it.
Go
ahead, Ray.
a lot has been made, obviously, just, following up on that question of, this kind of stress or, sort of bad feeling that may be present in the locker room if, maybe there's fractions that want to go with Jimmy and then fractions with Trey, all of that. But what I haven't heard, and this is really interesting, this is what Kittle and Richard Sherman were talking about on Sherman's podcast, is they talked about the confidence and the calming nature of bringing Jimmy back. And that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, they talked about one thing that the outside doesn't realize is, you put 6 months of grinding into getting ready for the season. And the idea that if Trey goes down, all of that work is for naught. Is that in your experience? Do you find that having a backup quarterback that's competent and that can, still kind of lead, do you think that is going to be a massive sort of almost stress reliever or kind of a freeing feeling for the guys in the locker room?
100%. It's a stress relieving mechanism for the GM too. I would sleep good at night knowing I have Jimmy G. I wouldn't sleep good if I had a rookie as my backup option. But that's the same really at any position. Contrast that with what's happening in Dallas now. They lose their left tackle, Tyrone Smith, for what looks like the season. Now we're scrambling around trying to sign Jason Peter, 40 years old. Why didn't we have a plan for that?
Yeah.
I think as a GM, I want to have a plan for all of this stuff ahead of time. And we're not going to make stuff up as we go. So I think that's the alternative, is you lose a guy and you're not ready for it. So again, I think this sets the 49ers up for a bigger season had something either go wrong medically with Trey Lance or in his development as a player. So again, it all makes sense to me, and I think it's a win-win. I haven't heard an argument yet, Ryan, that makes me rethink my position that the 49ers are way better with Jimmy G than they are without him.
Outside of the quarterback, I got to get your thoughts on John Lynch and the job that he's done. John, they've missed on some high picks, some day one and day two picks. I mean, they missed on Solomon Thomas. We don't know about Trey Lance. Mike McGlinchey was a top 10 pick. They missed on Dante Pettis. They missed on Jalen Hurts. They missed on CJ Beathard. These are all guys. They missed on Joe Williams, guys in the first 3 rounds of the draft. That being said, this team has done an exceptional job from the 5th round and after. They landed George Kittle in round 5, DJ Jones in round 6, and they've absolutely killed it, Randy, and with the undrafted free agents. I mean, Azeez Al-Shaair, Raheem Mostert. I mean, I could literally produce a list, Kevin Givens, that goes 10, 12 deep. And I think Lynch is coming off a real nice draft class this year. But I wanted to ask you about the philosophy, because they've put a lot of resources in the D line, it's a 49er franchise philosophy, as you well know, that predates Lynch, goes back to John Marshall and Tony Rossano and Bill McPherson and these guys. They always had Dennis Brown, Ted Washington, Michael Carter, Kevin Fagan. They had deep D lines. They always believed in D line guys. They brought in Haley. They you name it. I mean, Chris Dolman, Kevin Green, Tim Harris, Ricky Jackson, all these guys, Richard Dent, they all came through here. But now you've got a way to neutralize. It seems like the best quarterbacks, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, some of these guys can neutralize the dominant D line by just getting the ball out quick. And the quick game, empty sets, and spread the field and get the ball out of the quarterback's hand and play with rhythm. And it negates a lot of the incredible talent that the 49ers have on that defensive line. I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on them, their philosophy of emphasizing the defensive line, that it all stems from the belief of, if you can't move that quarterback off his spot and make him uncomfortable, what are you really doing? And so they've emphasized it, but now there's a way to neutralize that element of that dominant element of the game. Give me your thought on roster building and where the importance of the D line, where you would put it.
Well, the game has definitely evolved. That's for sure. It's definitely changed over the years. The rules have had a lot to do with that. It's become more of a 7-on-7 league. There's no doubt. But I will say this, I don't think you can ever go wrong drafting big guys and fast guys. And that's been the same for 30 years. You've got to take all the big guys you can get. And I think where teams do get sideways sometimes is they start to draft for need. And I don't know anything about their philosophy, in San Francisco. I know this to reflect one of your points you made. I give Adam Peters a lot of credit, and those college scouting guys, they've done a great job of identifying late round picks and college free agents. And I credit them and the staff for that, because your decision makers don't see those guys. So you're trusting that those scouts and that side of the building is doing a good job. So I think they should be credited for that. I have no doubt Adam Peters is going to be a GM in this league very soon. He's obviously been interviewed several times in the past. So having said that, I don't know that their process of how they put their draft boards together every year, all the details of it. But I think you struggle when you start filling needs early in drafts. And I know, speaking from my past, the picks that we struggled the most with were when I tried the hardest to fill a need. I saw others do it on my way up the food chain to being a GM and on the way down. I just think you've got to draft best player available more so than ever before. And a lot of the times the value you put on those players due to the position they play, there's a reason those defensive linemen always get picked high, because there's not many of them. So I think you can't go wrong drafting offensive, defensive linemen, and fast guys. And so that's, again, I think a proven track record of any evaluator in the NFL. If you've done more of that, I think you're going to be held in higher regard. Again, not knowing how they process their draft board and how they set it with the 49ers, I can't really be critical of what they're doing, not knowing that. But I do know this: John Lynch is a good listener. He sees a lot of players from a different point of view because he's an ex-player. And I think he's really smart, and I think he listens to the people around him. That's not a bad thing.
Randy, zooming out a little bit on the rest of the NFC, I'm really interested. Who do you think is even a possibility to make it to the Super Bowl out of the NFC? Because I haven't felt like this league or the NFC has been this wide open. Particularly the NFC West has not been this wide open in a while. And you got Tampa Bay, Brady, interior offensive line issues. Rodgers lost weapons. A lot of people are on the Eagles now, but yeah, I'd love to hear who you think actually has a possibility to make it out of the NFC.
Well, I'm going to start with the champs. I know you guys probably don't want to hear that, but I don't know how the Rams could not be the favorite going in. So I still see Matt Stafford. I still see Sean McVay. I still see the things that they did defensively, them being able to do that this year. So I think they're the favorites going in. The one team I don't hear a lot about, and I had a chance to watch the Packers and Saints in joint practices a couple weeks back in Green Bay. I think the Saints are a good team. I think their defense is really good. I think their special teams are really good, and that gets no play at all. If Jameis Winston can just be consistent, doesn't have to be off the charts, he can't be awful, just has to be okay, I think they're going to win their share of games. I'm with you on Tampa. I don't think Tampa is what is all that, if that's the words to use. I think they have had change. They obviously have a new coach, new head coach. They've had some injuries. We know what Brady's gone through the last month. I just don't know if they can recalibrate what they've had there the last couple of years. The window isn't always open for life. Once you make it, through it the first time, doesn't mean you're going to make it the next year or the next year. They've had a lot of things kind of go their way, and now they've got some adversity. So I don't see it there. I think the Packers are going to be a different team, Ryan, but I think they're going to still be good. And I know they don't have the tools on the perimeter that they've had before, but I think their defense is better. I think their running game could be top notch, and I think they're just going to have to lean on different things. I think Aaron Rodgers will still process and get it to the right guy. I don't doubt that at all. But I think they're going to be a running team more so than they've been in the past and rely on defense. So I think Matt LaFleur is going to have to change a little bit of his style, because they're going to have to grind it out and grind out some wins this year. They don't have the big playability that they've had in the past with Devontae Adams. So those are just some of my thoughts on the NFC. I think the AFC is primarily the better conference right now. So, but I do like the Saints. I like the Rams. I like the Packers probably third, and we'll see. I like the 49ers if we knew what we were getting as that quarterback. That's the only doubt I have.
You mentioned Green Bay. Watch out for Romeo Doubs, man. The kid from Nevada, I thought he impressed me in Nevada and in the pre-draft process, and now he looked good in the preseason to me as well. I always look at teams and say, do they have the central relationship in any organization is the head coach and the general manager. And to me, if you get those two spots right, it's, I don't want to say it's a matter of time before you win, but I really believe you're on the right path to winning. And if you said to me, who do you really like? I like Tom Telesco as a young GM. I like Chris Ballard in Indianapolis as a young GM. Obviously Eric DeCosta inherited the Ravens thing from Ozzie Newsome. They've got a lot of momentum going there. You know the league well. I mean, what regime do you like? Who do you respect as far as the personnel evaluators around the league? There's so many good ones. Kevin Colbert just hung it up in Pittsburgh. He obviously did a phenomenal job there with personnel through the years, and is considered and has been widely recognized for it. But is there Les Snead? You mentioned the Rams. Les Snead and Sean McVay. You know, Snead has traded a lot of number one picks for veterans because they've missed at the top of the draft, and that's obviously worked well for them. Who do you like? Who do you like as far as young hierarchy in the league? Because that to me seems like the thing that I always look at when I'm trying to map out who's really building towards something.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so much gets put on GMs in particular as being the pickers of players. That's really less than half of their job. Trust me. They've got to be people, communicators, fixers. They've got to fix things that go haywire. They've got to keep everybody in line on the same page. I think that's the misnomer, that when people look around the league, they say, oh, this guy can pick players. Well, he better have a great staff. He better communicate well with everybody in the building, and you better have some really good people skills as a leader. And so those things kind of go unmatched and under the radar. But I think you hit on it. I think Les Snead, regardless of how many picks he's given away, he's done a great job. When I look around the league at teams that are talented year in and year out, I look at the Rams, I look at the 49ers, I look at the Ravens. I think they've done a really good job. And you mentioned Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh. They work well together. They get great support from leadership. They've minimized change there, and I think that matters. You mentioned Telesco with the Chargers. Tom's on his third head coach. So most of us don't get a chance to hire three head coaches.
Right.
So we all see that how we see it. But I think you hit. I think Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, they've only been together a short time, but how can you argue with what they've put together? And I think this year will be a little bit of a referendum on change and how they adapt in Green Bay. But those are some of the better guys. And I think, hey, for the last decade, I know that they're not the flavor of the month this year, but John Snyder and Pete Carroll in Seattle have earned a chance to move on as well together. And I think their relationship has been well documented, but they've had a decade of excellence themselves. So I agree with you. Those guys, it's funny. I've worked, I'll just say this as we end this part of it. I've worked under coaches, I've worked level with coaches, and I've been the coach's boss. But in all structures, my philosophy and our relationship never changed. In other words, it really doesn't matter who's in charge. And so when you look around at identifying coaches and GMs and their relationship, it's the tandem of how they work together that matters, not who has the hammer at the end of the day and who gets to decide what. They both have to set ego aside, and they have to realize that none of us are smarter than all of us. And those are the places that I think you'll find success. You find that with the Rams. You find that with the Ravens. You found it in Pittsburgh for years with Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin. Now they have a little change there, but that to me is the important part of the relationship.
My last question before we let the great Randy Mueller go. Do you have any what I'd call my guys? Is there anybody from this year's draft that just really stuck out, or somebody that really stood out to you that maybe you feel like was undervalued in the draft, or heck, it could be even a second or third year guy that you're really high on that you think maybe has an opportunity this year to sort of break out? Any positions? Completely open question. Just wondering if you could give me one of your my guys.
Well, if we go back to this year's draft, and I looked at a lot of guys, I just by habit, that's how I spend my time, Ryan. I probably watch too much film. My daughter calls me. She said, "Dad, you just sit in the dark room and watch the computer all day." I'm not proud of it, okay, but I do like watching football. So My quarterback this year that didn't get a lot of run, that I think will surprise people down the road, it may not be with the team he's with, is Bailey Zappi. The
Wow, New England
Patriots, who actually had a really good preseason, who I think you'll hear from down the road somewhere, somehow. I like him, from Western Kentucky. The other kid that we've seen a little bit of, who was my number one tight end this year, and I'm not beating my chest at all, but I'm saying Isaiah Likely, the tight end from Coastal Carolina.
in Baltimore.
He's been awesome all preseason. And he's a guy that most people didn't think highly of. He was my number one tight end going into last year's draft. And I think you're going to see from him this year what I saw in that this kid is advanced as a tight end. He's big, he's athletic. I think in the one preseason game this preseason, he caught 10 balls by halftime, like 10 for 108. And then they shut him down in week 3. How many fourth-round pick rookies do you see not dress the third preseason game because they're afraid he's going to get hurt? Not many. So those were a couple guys. Hey, we all see players that we end up following and that we liked. I think that's the fun part and the process of team building. You find different things that you like out of your own criteria, and then it's a matter of how your coaches develop them once you get them. So everybody has a few of these guys, but that's just a couple guys that I saw last year in the draft that I really liked.
Oh my God. I am going to rush straight to the Krueg Show Fantasy League right after that.
No, seriously, that's a good call. In fact, Coastal Carolina had a pretty good recruiting coordinator, if I remember correctly, a guy named Rick Mueller. I wonder if there was a connection there. Another guy from Coastal. I didn't even know that much about Coastal 5 years ago, but they had a guy come out in last year's draft, a defensive end named Tyrone Jackson, who can really bend the edge, and the Eagles got him. Give me your thought on the Eagles. I think the Eagles, I love their addition of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson as a tremendous nickelback. They got him from the Saints. Saints were hugged up on the cap, probably need to create a little room. But Howie Roseman, it's been interesting watching some of their coaches interact in the war room when the cameras have been on, when they drafted Milton Williams. I know Donahoe was upset that he wanted somebody else. I really liked Milton Williams, so I was like, wow, I'm kind of with Howie on that one. But I kind of like what the Eagles are building. I like some of them. To me, I don't know about the monster kid from Georgia. We'll see what he does, but I like several of their moves the last few years, and I like the way they're building that roster. They also had the Coastal Carolina connection with Jackson, but what do you think of Philly before we let you out of here, Randy, and what they seem to be a lot of people's kind of NFC dark horse contender, and they're building a really nice team on both sides of the ball, really.
Yeah, I like what they've done there a lot. I like Howie's job. He's done a really good job. I think the only hesitation I have, and I would pick them to win that division in the NFC East, is Jalen Hurts. And I'm a Jalen Hurts guy. I've seen him improve from his days at Alabama to Oklahoma to now being in the league a couple years. I really like the intangibles Jalen Hurts has. If they can advance their passing game from the pocket just a little bit, I think they'll be a good team in the NFC this year. I think the additions that they've made on the perimeter to help their downfield passing game is good on paper. Now it's a matter of managing the team and getting more out of Jalen. And that's going to be Nick Sirianni, the coach, that's going to fall on his shoulders as well. But between those two, they've got to advance their drop back passing game. And I think the Eagles are going to be really good.
We're going to let you go, Randy. Awesome stuff. You're an incredible wealth of information. Ryan and I are going to be covering the 49ers for Talk Sport out of London and the Gridiron podcast out of London this year, in addition to working for 95.7 The Game on the radio side. And so we're really excited, and we'd love to bend your ear a couple times this year throughout the year and get your perspective as the year develops. It's unbelievable the amount of, obviously credibility that you bring to the table, but the insights are absolutely invaluable. And so we know we took a lot of your time this morning, but we do appreciate you, and say hi to Rick. He's meant a lot to my professional career. He meant a lot to me as I was growing up. I was 23, 24 when I was I was a GA / QC coach for the gold miners. And those guys all taught me, him, Bob Mattos, Bill Urbanik. They taught me the value of hard work. It's funny. I got there at 7, and at around 7 o'clock, because they said, hey, it's going to be long hours. So I drove out to Rancho Marietta. I'd worked till about 7, 8 o'clock. I'd been there 13 hours. I'm like, time to go. And Bill Urbanic said, Larry, let me tell you, you're lazy. You're lazy. And the youth has been wasted on the young. He's like, I'll just pick you up. I'm like, Coach, go ahead, pick me up. What time are you going to pick me up? I'll be there at 4:45. So he started picking me up and taking me to camp at 4:45. He would drop me off after camp at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sitting there talking to Rick around the meeting room one day. And I'm like, the hours that you guys put into this, he's like, oh yeah, this is it. You better have the right girlfriend or the right wife or the right situation, or it's all going south. But I love Rick, and I love what the career that he's carved out, and really appreciate your time. So thanks again for coming on. Hopefully later this year we can get you back on.
Anytime, guys. Good luck to you this season, and look forward to chatting again.
Thank you very much, Randy. Randy Mueller, former GM of the Dolphins and Saints, longtime NFL executive, stopping by on the Krueg Show.